All right, let's dive right in. Today we're tackling a topic that's sure to get those grammar gears turning, those French articles and
Oh
determiners.
yeah, those little words can be tricky.
They really can. We're talking lo, pa, un, de, all those little words that seem to pop up everywhere. And from looking through your notes, it seems like you've been wrestling with these, and honestly, who hasn't?
Oh, it's a common struggle for sure.
Yeah.
It's like they're so small, but they carry so much weight in French.
Right, like they're tiny but mighty.
Exactly. They can make or break your sentence.
So it's kind of like in English, we can sometimes get away with being a little loosey-goosey with grammar, but French is all about precision.
Precisely. And articles are a prime example. They tell you so much about the noun, the gender, the number, if you're talking about something specific or general. It's a whole different level of detail.
No kidding. So let's start unpacking this. From what I've gathered, the big three are definite, indefinite, and partitive articles, right?
I got it. Those are our foundation. The definite article, you're familiar with the in English, and in French we've got le, la, and le. So similar idea.
Okay.
But with that, added French flair.
Right, because everything in French has to have a gender, even grammar.
Exactly.
But tell me more about this French flair. How do these definite articles work differently?
Well, for starters, French is even more specific about using definite articles. For example, if you want to say patience is a virtue, you'd actually say la patience est une vertu in French, using la, even though you're not talking about one specific patience.
Wow, that's interesting. In English, saying the patience, it just sounds so weird.
Exactly, and that kind of highlights how French uses articles to create a different kind of flow and precision.
Oh, yeah.
And this need for specificity also extends to things like languages. Je comprends l'allemand, for I understand German.
Okay.
Or countries, je veux visiter la France.
So it's all about being super intentional with those nouns. Okay, I'm starting to see the logic here. Now, what about those indefinite articles, those a or an in English?
So in French, you've got for masculine singular, une for feminine singular, and here's where it gets interesting. A plural indefinite article. Day.
Wait, hold on. Plural indefinite articles.
Yeah.
You're blowing my mind a little bit.
It's one of the things that makes French fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So imagine you're at a bakery, you want to order some croissants. In French, you would say, je voudrais des croissants. You're using des to indicate an unspecified number of croissants.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like saying some croissants, but sometimes we just skip the some in English entirely.
Right.
Which is kind of fascinating when you think about it.
It is, and that's what day often does. It acts like some, but can be subtle, even invisible in the English translation.
And that's where things get extra interesting with day, because now you have to factor in the gender of the noun too, right?
You're exactly right. French nouns have genders, masculine or feminine, and it affects everything around them,
I know.
including those articles and determiners.
I remember when I first started learning French, the whole gender thing felt like a whole other language to learn on top of the actual words.
Yeah.
It's not always intuitive.
It definitely takes practice, and it's true. There aren't always clear-cut rules. Sometimes you just have to embrace the memorization.
Right.
But here's the thing. Once you start noticing the patterns, it becomes a bit like a code you're cracking.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So when we're talking about these patterns and how gender affects things, you mentioned determiners.
Yeah.
So we've tackled articles, but what else falls under that determiner umbrella?
Well, think of determiners like the noun's best friend.
Okay.
They're always hanging out together, giving us extra information about that noun.
Okay.
We've got possessives, demonstratives, interrogatives, and quantifiers, just to name a few.
Okay, let's break those down a bit.
Right.
What are some examples of those possessive determiners?
Possessives are all about ownership. My, your, his, her, our, their, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But here's where the French really kicks things up a notch.
Okay.
In English, we just use my regardless of the noun. But in French, you have to choose between mon, ma, or mes, depending on the gender and number of the noun.
Wait, really? My has multiple personalities in French.
It does. Let's say you have a book, un livre. To say my book, you'd say mon livre, because livre is masculine.
Okay.
But if you have a car, une voiture, which is feminine, you'd say ma voiture.
Whoa. Okay, so it's not just remembering if a noun is masculine or feminine, it's also remembering which my to use with it.
You got it. And it gets even more nuanced because the possessive determiner also has to agree with the possessor.
Oh, no.
So his book and her book both translate to son livre because son is the third person singular possessive. But for their book, you'd use leur livre because leur is the third person plural possessive.
Okay, my brain is officially doing gymnastics trying to keep up with all these agreements.
I know it's a lot, right?
But I have to say, there's something kind of amazing about how intricate and precise the French language is.
I agree. It's like a beautifully crafted puzzle where every piece has its place.
I love that analogy. And speaking of puzzles, let's move on to those demonstrative determiners. Those are the this and that words, right?
Exactly. And yes, you guessed it, they need to agree in gender and number two.
Oh, come.
Think of it like this. In English, we use this for both this book and this chair.
Right.
But in French, you'd say ce livre because livre is masculine.
Right.
And cette chaise because chaise is feminine.
So it's all about that context.
Yes.
It really is like learning a secret code.
It is.
But once you start to see the patterns, it all clicks into place.
And those aha moments are what make language learning so rewarding.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've tackled definite and indefinite articles, plus those possessive and demonstrative determiners. What other fascinating characters are lurking in the world of French determiners?
Well, we've got those interrogative determiners like quel, which means which or what.
Right.
And, you got to love how French keeps things interesting.
Right.
Because even these question words change depending on what you're asking about.
Right. It's like quel has a split personality or something.
It does.
Depending on if it's with a masculine or a feminine noun. So it's quel livre for which book, but quelle chaise for which chair.
Exactly. It all comes back to that beautiful dance of agreement
I like that.
between the noun and those determiners.
Yeah.
And then we have those quantifiers, words like some, many, few, all, those words that give you a sense of quantity.
Okay.
They're a little more flexible in some ways, but still play a vital role in how the sentence comes together.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the main takeaway here is that in French, you can't just throw words together willy-nilly.
No.
It's all about paying attention to those details and how everything fits together,
Exactly.
especially when it comes to these articles and determiners.
You got it. It's like learning a beautifully choreographed dance
Ooh, I like that.
where every step is deliberate and graceful.
And every dance has its own rhythm. That actually reminds me, we talked earlier about how le can mean on or every before a day of the week.
Yes.
Like le lundi for on Mondays.
Right.
It makes you think about how even these tiny articles can reflect these cultural nuances.
What a fantastic observation.
Right.
You're right. It highlights how French emphasizes that routine or habitual action,
Yeah.
saying le lundi suggests a certain regularity ingrained in the language itself.
Right.
It's fascinating how much depth those little words can hold.
It really is. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. We've explored definite and indefinite articles, delved into possessive and demonstrative determiners, even dipped our toes into those intriguing interrogative determiners and quantifiers.
We've taken a deep dive.
We really have.
And what's so fascinating is that even though we've covered a lot,
Yeah.
there's always more to explore.
Of course, language is like that. There's always another layer to uncover.
is.
So as our listeners continue their French language journey, just remember that the key is to keep practicing, keep noticing those patterns, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because that's how we learn.
Absolutely. Embrace those mistakes. They're your stepping stones.
Exactly. Well said. It's been so much fun diving into this topic with you today.
It has. Always a pleasure to talk about the intricacies of the French language.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has left you feeling energized and ready to tackle those articles and determiners head on.